So it will be much more serious. Dear, I ask to say a few words on behalf of the foreign part of the organizing committee. And first of all, it's great that we have this workshop with all of you, top researchers and scientists, with a warm heart for multi-grid methods and of course for Achi Brandt. We know all Achi from his famous 1977 MATCOM paper, Multi-Level Adaptive Solution to Boundary Value Problems. But in 1973, 40 years ago, when I was 5 years old, Achi already published a proceedings paper, Multi-Level Adaptive Technique, MLAT, for fast numerical solution to boundary value problems. And I have the paper with me here today, of course. It's this paper. So sometimes when professors retire, they give their personal libraries with all the papers and reports away to somebody interested. So this way, I received Piet Hemker's and Piet Wesseling's multigrid libraries with classical papers and reports. Of course, many papers are online nowadays, but especially the early reports are very valuable to me. So my papers and reports on Achi's work from 1973 to say 1982 are complete and very impressive. There are handwritten notes from my supervisors and all such things. There are scientific reports from IKs and many things. Another such multigrid library is at the GMD in St. Augustin, Germany. That's another one I would be happy to acquire at some point. But since Klaus and Johannes Linde and others are still around, it may be difficult to get that one in my hands. So the 93 paper, it already contained the notion of multigrid plus adaptivity. It already had H-independent and rapid convergence for the Poisson problem. It was not yet so efficient multigrid for anisotropic problems, neither for the biharmonic problem. In that paper, there were already references to Bakhvalov and Fedorenko, and there was an acknowledgement to Nathan Dinar and Y. Shiftan. These are the students at that time. The 1977 paper, of course, then had the notion of full approximation scheme, local mode analysis, also line relaxation is discussed, analyzed and applied. Convergence for the biharmonic problem was greatly improved and the computational work and work unit were also introduced. And Shiftan and Dinar were again explicitly mentioned for the work in the period 1970-1972. So the 1977 manuscript is full of ideas waiting to be worked out. It took until 1987 before the full description of the well-working MLAT for the Poisson equation on an L-shaped domain was published in the Brandt paper, CISC paper, Local Mesh Refinement Multi-Level Techniques, a paper which I personally liked a lot. The paper worked out the initial ideas were full of helpful implementation details. Another one of my favorites is the 1980-1981 report, Multigrid Solvers for Non-Elliptic and Singular Perturbation Steady-State Problems. In that paper, the concept of H-ellipticity was introduced and singular perturbations were mentioned in detail. Achi also indicated that for convection-dominated convection diffusion problem, multigrid may not work so naturally as it did for the Poisson problem. So he knew that at a very early stage. So my friend Irat, took him 10 years though to get a fix to that problem and published it in JCP. So he had the apple and he had the recipe, but still the apple pie took 10 years. But of course there was the army, or there was a long publication period before it got published, of course. So acknowledgement in the 81-80 report were for his co-workers at that time, Burgers, Dinar, Donovan and Siddelkover. Another important paper with early ideas was the first algebraic multigrid paper, where Achi was one of the co-authors. This work evolved into very useful and efficient solvers for some complex industrial applications on highly unstructured grids. And again, the bulk of the success was approximately 10 to 15 years from the first publication. And the early CFD work with the distributive relaxation by Nathan Dinar was also impressive. It formed the basis, together with Anthony Jameson's work, which was acknowledged in the 1976 iCase report, report number 76.8 with Jerry South, application of a multi-level method to transonic flow calculations. It was the basis for the great success of multigrid for CFD. With the 1984 Guide to Multigrid Development, where many of the early writings were included, like Achi's contribution to the proceedings of the first EMG conference in Cologne, multigrid had grown out of its baby years, growing up on its way to applications based on PDEs and sophistication for a wide range of non-PDE applications. And at this stage, I should not forget the multigrid research by Achi's former students on several of the problems for which plain multigrid did not work well, like the work by Shlomo Tazan, Ira Lifshitz, Boris Diskin, and also numerous other important contributions, like the multigrid treatment of integrals for applications in physics, and in particular for molecular dynamics and many other different fields. I personally learned a lot from Achi while I worked at the GMD in Germany from 1993 until 2001, and especially in the time period 1996 to 2000, when Ulrich, Tony Schuller and myself were writing a multigrid book. Achi was actively involved and really wanted that something came out which would make sense for a longer period of time. So we devised several multigrid approaches for particular problems in the book, and Achi then added a completely different multigrid treatment for some of these problems in his appendix to the book. It was typical maybe, and it was a very fruitful period and a great adventure for myself. So after the writing of the book, it was time for me to do something else, different work environment and different research direction, and I lost contact a little bit with Achi. Only on one occasion, unexpectedly, he mailed me in 2005 saying that in one of my later papers, I had made a reference to a paper. Doesn't matter so much, right? I made a reference to a paper of Achi's, but I made it at the wrong place in the text. Of course, I corrected that right away. I started to focus on financial mathematics, since there are also PDEs that need to be solved, and thought to be the first one to work on multigrid for linear complementarity problems. But I was mistaken, of course. 20 years earlier, Achi, in a cooperation with Colin Cryer, in detail worked on multigrid for free boundary problems at the University of Wisconsin. And recently, a method called multi-level Monte Carlo was developed by Mike Giles from Oxford University for Monte Carlo applications in mathematical finance. And it appeared that it was in fact a concretization of the initial ideas and insights that Achi wrote down on multi-level Monte Carlo methods in the early 1990s for physics problems. So dear Achi, my congratulations with the 40 years of applicable state-of-the-art multigrid solvers in all these disciplines, and I wish you a long life of wisdom and early views, and happy anniversary.